share screen. Okay, recording. So quick overview for anyone watching this. We met today as a Liberating Structures crew, and we decided that the exercise we want to go through together is to kind of pull in non-liberating structures frameworks that we're all aware of, and then kind of start populating over those liberating structures where we think they could be used, and just discussing the different frameworks. And then we've kind of got a short list here of things that we want to discuss, and that's what we're going to do now. So we've got maybe just going from left to right. Who wants to shout out on the first one and just give us and name it and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, I'm the least sure that this one's going to work,
Okay,
but that's kind of why I picked it. So this is Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. So the TLDR is inside the donut is shortfall, scarcity. Outside the donut is overconsumption, basically, from an ecological perspective. So inside the donut, if we think of, and this is about economic systems primarily, but inside the donut is basically all the ways that sort of contemporary capitalism sort of fails some amount of people to secure housing, energy, food, water, education, blah, blah, blah. And we can imagine an economy that would be both sufficient, that would provide the necessities for the majority or for everyone, quote unquote, that also is within the bounds of ecological constraints. So within the sort of Club of Rome's framing around limits to growth. And so the donut economy is this theoretical regenerative economy that satisfies needs and doesn't overshoot or overconsume and burn the fuck out of the planet.
great. Quick question to kind of refine this further, to turn this into something we could start talking about with liberating structures. Can you frame liberating structures involves people and people going through a process? So what is the process that you imagine people would be doing with this framework? Is it learning the framework? Is it assessing the world and putting it into this framework or context? Like, what is the process here that you would like to kind of discuss for liberating structures?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure. The first knee-jerk reaction, intuition might be like an initial evaluation of where are we in terms of this framework. Right. So it might be like some form of mapping exercise that we might sort of do. Okay, here's our conditions. How do we make sense of how do we gather information in order to come to a conclusion about where we're at in terms of the actualities of maybe a local context in satisfying this.
Okay, so what I heard there was a bit something of like a mapping exercise of how do we kind of use this framework to kind of bring it out of the abstract into more like concrete like things, like talking about like our real world, and think and kind of trying, and maybe the group trying to explore like the group's dynamics or the group's infrastructure and put it in the context of this framework, and how can we use liberating structures to help people use this as a lens upon them of reflection on themselves or something like that. Does that
Yeah,
carry up?
No,
that's the
there's a
vibe.
bit more precise. It's about evaluation. The way I heard Jeremy put it is that you take a situation, a concrete land, a town, a commune, whatever, and you look at it through this lens in terms of evaluation. How's it doing in terms of whatever the criteria you want to use here?
Sure. Are we
I
within the donut? Something like that.
Are you in the donut? Are you outside of the donut? Are you, I don't know where you are.
no, this is well something behind this also is if you have mentioned evaluation. I don't know. I suppose you are used to this word that is the theory of change, no? I suppose behind you were explaining the sub theory of change, no? So also interesting from my side how to design or build collectively theories of change. I think it's always interesting and validate them too.
How does that relate? Or is that a different project, Carlos?
No, it's well, I suppose that this is a kind of visualization of this, but if we will pass to evaluate to the next step of evaluating, I mean, we should also try to explain how the different elements are connected in a kind of theory of change, and what happens if they are connected in one way, that I suppose they will go to the shortfall side, and if they are connected in other way, or if some hypotheses or contextual factors happen together with other events, then we go to the overshoot side. No?
Who's next?
Okay, great. So can I move us on to the next one? And we can discuss this business model canvas quickly. I've used this a lot. I can quickly talk about it. So I think from my perspective, there's like two aspects to this that would be interesting from a liberating structures perspective. One would be teaching people the business model canvas, like actually how it works and what goes where. And then there's kind of, once you understand it, actually using liberating structures to kind of have specific conversations along the journey. So there's two aspects to this, is like, and maybe this is true for others as well, of like LS to learn the framework is the one thing, and then the other thing would be LS to use LS as part of the process. And I think that probably the latter is maybe more interesting.
What do you mean by use LS as part of which process?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Sorry, so what's the process you want? Well, you say use.
Yeah, so it's so with the business model canvas, there's a key set of there's a key way that you work through the canvas. So you start with,
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you know, okay, so like that's what I was trying to say, of like when you're facilitating that, what liberating structures would help you kind of have. I always find like those, when you're having those conversations, you get bogged down and people start debating over things rather than kind of just moving quickly through it. Maybe I didn't understand the question there, Phil.
Well, I mean, when you say use LS as part of the process, you know, like filling the blocks, I mean, you know, filling the map or what?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of the way I see it.
Okay.
Okay. Again, my field is monitoring and evaluation, and similar to, again, I am not so familiar with these kind of business models, because they seem more for private sector. No? I am used to others that are related to, for example, NGOs. I suppose you are used to the logical framework approach and this kind of process. So this has some elements of this, but has some of the elements they are not there. No, I think this is a bit linking what is a logical framework and a theory of change, because you want to test some other elements. And I think what you were saying, then it sounds to be, well, I don't know, if the liberating structures, so the participation could be utilizing the design, the design phase to start filling, and there are other phases that is afterwards when this model is running, for the monitoring to update how things are happening. No, I suppose I don't know if I understood. So monitoring, and also could be at the end the evaluation to check.
Dan, are you familiar with that? Is that you that put this? Are you familiar with this particular board?
I'm not familiar with the purpose, community, and government. No, I use another one which is called the Social Lean Canvas in New Zealand, which is very similar. It doesn't have, it's got purpose and governance. It's very close. So I kind of understand the context of what these other, I can understand what the other four aspects of it are that are being added to it.
But can you tell me why there's the cost and the revenue that got lost in translation?
You mean what would normally be in the governance at the bottom?
Yeah, there would be cost and revenue.
Yeah, I wouldn't have removed that. So that's a really good point. I think that, yeah, it's not really a business model canvas without cost and okay, let me
Sounds
just
more like
grab,
wishes.
okay, why don't you just quickly discuss this one? I'll go grab a picture of the other canvas because it might be better to use the other one.
Cool.
One sec. Um,
Now, who's a fan of the double diamond?
Is that no?
Is
that
there
wasn't
anybody
me.
here that is a fan of the double diamond sort of framework?
Somebody highlighted it. Well, I mean, the double diamond, design thinking process is pretty legion, right? It's relatively, this is a very clear version of it as well. We're talking about the process of diverging and converging around identifying user needs and the problem space, and then converging towards solutions, right?
I know.
So, in the way that we would engage in, if you think about the design sprint, if you want to go back to sort of process, if we think about a design sprint specifically, the way is the way in which we might both develop a prototype and collect user feedback and reevaluate our basic hypothesis as a result of that data. Mm,
Mhm.
So yeah. Anybody else?
I think you nailed it. I think it's a pretty ubiquitous. It's probably the one of everything on the board is probably one of the most understood or popular that I think that we've put up. So that would certainly make it interesting from a kind of mapping exercise. Anyone else want to add? Otherwise, we can just move on to the next one as well and just kind of make our way through talking about each of these things.
And one question I am not used to, but why a diamond? Why
Uh,
two cycles, for example, and not three or four? I mean,
yeah, so it is about, yeah, so definitely it's they call it the double diamond, but like the idea with it is that you kind of keep on going through an expansion and contraction. Like it's not just two, it's like as many as you want. But it's the reason why they put two there is just to kind of show you what the process is, that you kind of repeat itself.
okay.
Yeah, but like, yeah, 100%. Like it doesn't just end, obviously, it carries on. Should we do the complexity disorder?
Yeah, well, that's the Cynefin framework, and the Cynefin framework recognizes that there are several kinds of systems in which you can operate, and this is part of the idea of sense making, and that the way you operate will make it efficient. The way you decide, that's interesting because in fact, uh, this model doesn't really help you to decide which system you're in. But it gives you, once you decided what system you're in, it gives you the way to act and take decisions and you can build strategies and you can do all kinds of things once you've decided that, right? It's a decision-making tool. It's a help to decision-making tool.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. So can we use the liberating? So what kind of process, LS process we could use is precisely to, for example, to find out which system given a situation.
Nice.
Awesome.
The idea is, of course, that things are more complicated than this, and that a situation can have different parts of the situation can live in different places, right? Or at different moments you can be at different places. So that's the thing that very rarely gets addressed, if you want. This idea of how first of all, there's no good or bad system, and how a situation can sort of spread throughout the framework.
Yep. Nice. I'll move us along. Next one.
That's the Wardley maps. I'm not very familiar with it, but I know it's used very often. Are you familiar with it, Dan?
Yeah. I watched some of the videos from the guy. I
Okay.
never like you, I've never used them, but very interesting how he approaches things.
Exactly.
I think the way I would say it is I found it like almost too deep for me. Is how, if that makes sense. Like it was too scientific in it. Oh, I don't know how to explain that. Yeah. But yeah, it was always it was very interesting.
Well, we can come back to it if you want.
It was complex, no?
Um, anyone else want to? Yeah. Oh, what Jeremy or Carlos? Have you
This seems
played with Wardley maps?
very complex. Eh? This last one. I mean, even visually, it's difficult to
Yeah.
understand. I mean, I don't know if this could not be a better has not a better visualization. I mean, to simplify what are the key elements of this model.
Mm.
It is not helping a lot to try to understand. I mean, like no, you say I don't enter here because it's too complex, no?
Well, we can come back to it if you want. I think that it's worthwhile looking at it because it's really used, and it has a multi-usage type thing. As you can see, this is a product. So which part of the product belongs where? Okay, so that you can act accordingly. So you don't
Yeah.
act this way. But we can come back to that and make it a case if you guys like it.
Yeah. Where are we? Lastly, or was we got? So I think maybe Jeremy added one in the background. So we've got the Agile Manifesto. Do you want to? You already started this, Jeremy. I mean, everyone's familiar. I assume that everyone's familiar with it.
Yeah, so these are the principles in particular from the Agile Manifesto, and basically what I went through is I said, okay, if this is the imperative, what's the structure that is the most logical to help you that you can just sort of grab off the shelf in order to accomplish that imperative?
I'm going to
So,
grab this from. I mean, it's a Scrum process, but it's from. Forget about the fact it says Scrum. Actually, I don't care about that. But it's from this product called Parable, which is a fantastic product. But it's kind of talking about like it's an agile tool, and it's talking about the different rhythms that you run. I think that it's somewhat related to this, and it just gives us a bit of a visual of. But yeah, I think that it's interesting. I think the interesting thing what you've done here, Jeremy, is you've connected liberating structures to a manifesto rather than and the manifesto doesn't really describe a process, that's an interesting kind of take on things as well.
yeah, yes, it is.
We've got
Yes, it can imply a process. I mean, a theory of change, no? So afterwards, we should unpack which comes first and which comes after, which are the principles and the hypothesis. But so
yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I would say the manifesto's values and principles are sort of a generator function for lots of different tools and processes that come from these values and principles. I can also add, just for shits and giggles, a remix I did of the Agile Manifesto's values using liberating structures. But um, it could be interesting. We'll see.
that's a great picture. So I'm just aware of time. It's been lovely kind of going over this, but I probably only have time for going through one of these maybe today, and then we might have to kind of cycle back to it next time, or asynchronously. How do people feel?
Yes, also we should think, well, perhaps the homework and also the next meeting, what we will do, or we will continue like with this, or we'll do another.
We can reprioritize, like we can just choose like what we want to do at the next one. I feel if I was kind of voting for a direction, at least for me, I think I like the complexity disorder. That would be one of my faves to do. Possibly the double diamond, just because it's so ubiquitous. That would be the two that I would be most attracted to spending today on. What about other people?
Same here.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think the business model canvas would be actually a very high value, just because that
Yeah,
there's a relationship between like product in general, business and product, and facilitation. That the best product people I've ever met were kick-ass facilitators, actually. And that seems like so for some reason, however, in a lot of places that focus on product and underemphasize skill.
so this is the business model canvas that I use. It's developed by a impact consulting company in New Zealand, Okina. Actually, they're a foundation. They're not a company. And there's a nice kind of write-up here. And it was done in collaboration with I think this guy, I think his name's Dave Moskovich. I wonder if it's on the here. Rowan Yeoman, Dave Moskovich, and the Akina Foundation. So Rowan Yeoman and Dave Moskovich are probably one of New Zealand's like more. They've been around the block in the startup space for 30 years. Like both incredibly competent people. So they collaborated with the foundation to develop this. And this thing on the left is nice because it kind of tells you the process of how you actually fill out the canvas. You start with purpose, then you move to customer segments. So you kind of there is a process of like an opinionated process of how you go through this. And I'd be very curious about maybe less about the canvas itself on the right. That's the output or the asset that you create. But it would be more probably going through this and saying, okay, for the purpose, what kind of liberating structure could you use for having this conversation? And then you could kind of work through this, maybe.
Dope.
But yeah, I think that would be a dope one to do as well. So we've got three. Any other, Carlos, do you have any other one that you want to put in the ring as a
No, well, again,
list?
this business model is very similar to the logical framework approach. Again, that is used in the social projects. They are not so focused in cost, more they are inputs because the revenue is well, it's more related to social impact and things like this. But it is very similar, very similar. So.
All right, nice. Quick like facilitation. Can someone just shout out the one that they want to do of these three?
Let's go with Cynefin for the moment, since that also relates to something that Philip actually has to do and deliver on.
That's kind.
Right, fair enough. Good way of prioritizing.
Relevance, I know, right?
Yeah, it's like how can we reduce the work for one of us?
Yeah, the workload, absolutely.
Workload-driven prioritization, love it. All right, we've got our thingy. What can you frame? Maybe I'll just pass this to you, Phil, and you can kind of take over facilitating us through this conversation because I think that I'm not familiar with this, and I think what I'm kind of trying to understand is like my question maybe to you would be like, how would a conversation about using this normally start?
Well, it would start in disorder. It would start where you don't know what you recommended. The recommendation is to start in a situation where you're saying, well, I'm not really sure what's going on. Okay, that would be the first thing. Then the next thing would be, okay, can I actually identify the situation as something that is complicated, something that is simple, something that is complex, or something that is chaotic?
Great.
And if I can do that, then how am I best? What's the indicated way of acting? As you can see, it's written in that framework there in front of you. So if you decide that you're in a complicated world, where expertise matters, where you can find a solution, where the problem space and the solution space are open, you believe that you can actually do something in those spaces with the things that you know right now, then you are encouraged to sense, which means whatever it is that you want to observe or take in or describe. Then you want to analyze it. That means that there's different views. Usually expertise is coming in, and then respond. And then you
Okay.
take. Okay.
Awesome.
If you're in a complex world, that means that you cannot do these things. These operations are not available to you. So you have to define a space now that is entangled, a space where prediction is not available, where constraints are more about connections than control. Okay, and so you want to act by probing. In other words, you want to test the system, the system, so that you can see how it reacts, hoping that it goes into the directions that you would want it to go.
Okay. Okay. So I think I heard a quite distinct first couple of processes, and I think I got a bit lost there in the middle, and then I heard a process there at the end around how you test once you kind of achieve that. So there's definitely what I heard there was like some sort of first kind of process or conversation. I think Jeremy started this with the thing in the middle of like trying to understand where the parts are and which kind of one of these kind of quadrants it goes to. So that's the first kind of conversation that we could be thinking about what liberating structure helps us for that. And then I think once you know where the parts are, then there's these kind of sub processes almost of sense, analyze, respond, or probe, sense, respond. And like those could each have their own liberating structures going into each of them. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. It's the one is the discovery and action dialogue could be maybe the one that you can put in disorder. By the way, it was called disorder. Now it's not called disorder. It's called aporia. But it doesn't matter. The idea is it's a space where either you are genuinely ignorant or about how to define the situation you're confronting, or you are lazy. You are. But the idea is to then what is now being shown is more complicated issues of liminality, of liminal spaces. Okay, how do you act in those liminal spaces, et cetera, et cetera. Here you have in the one that you're showing on the right, you have the idea of constraints, the definition of constraints, fixed constraints for clear, governing constraints, enabling constraints, no constraints. You have also the idea of good practice, best practice. Best practice, if you're serious about it, it can only be used if you have a situation that is clear, which means everybody knows about it, everybody can know about it, everybody agrees about it. There's no big deal. Okay, like taking your car and riding on the right side of the road, basically. The governing constraints are containing constraints, rules, protocols, that kind of things. They are the things that you see in linear processes. Okay, which is the definition, which is an attribute of complicated things can be linearized, can be processed in a linear manner. Okay, so it's standardized. You have standardization there, capable, and reproduction. Okay, all of which you don't have on the other one. So the constraints, on the other hand, that you're going to impose in the complex space are connecting, enabling constraints. You want something to happen. Okay, you don't want to constrain something. You want something you don't know, because you cannot predict. You don't know what your action is going to do. So you want to put some constraints that will allow you to follow up on what you will be observing as it goes through the process.
That makes sense
And,
to me.
and in chaotic thing, the first thing to do is act.
Right.
You know, there's no constraint, there's nothing, and therefore the first thing you have to do is put an order.
Right. What in the past, Phil, have you ever used liberating structures within within kind of exercise of using this framework with a group?
No, never.
Mhm. We have in, well, again, it is because this also much in evaluation, depending on what kind of object you are evaluating, we have this kind of approach also for making sense of if exactly if you can control, for example, the context uh, or not. No, for example, and we have the example of, for example, launching a rocket to the moon. It is normally something that is complicated. It's a technological constraint. You can organize the people. If you control everything, well, it has been. But and also there are other things that you cannot control, no? But also it's more complicated. And in terms of complex or chaotic, well, it could be past too complex, no? When you start to not controlling anything, because also you cannot go to the experience because it's unique, no? In this term, for example, we have raising a child, no? It's really complex. You cannot learn from the past. It's unique and it can be complex or chaotic. And
Yeah, very, very good, Carlos. It's exactly this. The idea of educating a child is a very good example of complexity, because what you did with a child, you cannot do with another one. So you always have to monitor. You always have to do modulating. You don't have a causality. You have modulations. You don't have solutions. You have attractors. There's a whole vocabulary that goes with complexity, but that shows that the sensitivity to the situation is completely different along with the tools. Like, for example, you take a organizational transformation from the point of view of complicated. You have ADCAR systems. You have all kinds of processes that gives you certification and things like that, right? They're linear, they're vague. They don't go into the how. They're usually large. They're usually top down. All of this are signifiers that point into the complicated area. And now we know that change and transformation is not very well, how do you say, I wanted to say taken care of by this approach, the complicated approach. It's very wasteful. And intellectually it is ethically it's not very robust.
So I'm jamming here. I think for your initial baseline. So it's interesting. The Cynefin sense making framework and Dave Snowden and the Cynefin Center, his nerds, have a big ass fucking toolkit that
Oh yeah.
is like almost one for one, but they have a big ass toolkit that are not like LS. He's going to be so pissed when he sees this. That are quite like LS.
He really is.
I mean, so there's some form of like story. There's got to be drama there. Maybe he's hurt. He's offended that that they went with the Stacy matrix and not the Cynefin sense making framework. So the disorder, one of the structures that I would propose in order to get a sense of where are you is the agreement certainty matrix. The agreement certainty matrix we can actually throw up. I didn't put it on this because it is slightly different, but the agreement certainty matrix is literally an exercise that is almost exists as a one-for-one parallel to the Cynefin sense-making framework. And every time I post that on Twitter, I shit you not, he shows up and is like, those are not the same things. But the protocol, I think, for identifying is good. And so what the agreement certainty matrix basically says is, and the reason I I prefer it over the Cynefin sense-making framework to get a baseline is because it offers more of a procedure versus having to explain all of this shit about these different domains. And the procedure basically is, so agreement. How close or how far from agreement are we? What the fucking problem is, right? What's the problem? Are we close to agreement about what the problem is, or are we far from agreement about what the problem is? Certainty. How certain are we of the solution? Are we close to certain what the solution is? Are we far from certainty where the solution is, right? And so based on, if you just put a 1 to 5, you know, you can poll everybody in the room. Where are we at from in terms of agreement on the problem? Where are we at in terms of how certain we are for the solution? And based on where you land in, if you put that on a sort of 2 by 2 matrix type thing, or fucking, you know, vertical horizontal chart, basically maps you to these different domains, with the exception of it doesn't include disorder. If you're very close to agreement on what the problem is and what the solution is, you're in simple, you're in clear. If you're middle-ish in the way about the problem and solution, then you're around complicated. If you're 3+ on both agreement and certainty, then you're in complex. And if you're, you know, 5+ on both, so to speak, then you're probably in chaos. And that can be a simple enough way to just say, oh, here, this is where we're at. Great. You know, it offers a procedure to create the artifact that basically says, oh, we think we're here. You think you're there. You think we're there. Where are we actually?
Very good. Yeah.
How is the name of this structure that you are describing that is similar to this one?
The
Okay.
agreement certainty matrix. I'll put a visual up on it in just a sec, because I can't talk and do shit at the same
It's really interesting. I did well, I still do, but I haven't done it for a while. But I did medieval sword fighting, like Western martial arts, as a hobby, and I had a great teacher in New Zealand who learned Latin to like be able to read manuscripts from back in the day. And one of the like things that he taught me was like there was this thing where you would look at the ground where you were standing and you would cross two swords and you would identify like four like directions, and they had like a strong and a weak movement forward and a strong and a weak movement backwards. And the noticing was when you studied your stance and how you move through space is that it was the recognition that you have a super stable stance with kind of your feet apart, and then you have unstable stances, which is basically the closer your feet are together, and or one foot and the other foot is like in transition, is unstable as well. And it's this kind of noticing that you have to move through uncertainty or instability to get back to stability. And I think there's something interesting here for me where we say disorder, but actually I feel like it's also another way of talking about is just uncertainty or instability. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a thing that we could intentionally go into in order to kind of like free ourselves up to better understand things. So I think like as a process, this is really beautiful for me because it means like inviting people to kind of shed their assumptions and shed their ideas of how things are and really step into that disorder and like stepping into like the what is the like, let's get back to primitives and it's deconstruct our kind of pre-existing structures and assumptions. So I think like there's something there for me around taking the group into disorder where we very intentionally kind of do away with things that so like it might be, so for example, if my company, like if I was having a company and it was struggling again, like going through a restructure and like dissolving people's roles would be a way of creating disorder in the company that you would then have to kind of work out of. So I think there's something quite interesting there for me of like, I think at the moment how we framed this is we are kind of assuming that disorder already exists rather than the idea of like we intentionally create it in order to create the situation for us to kind of birth something else out of it. So I think I'm thinking about composting, you know, at the end of a project or like project life cycles that at the end of a project, you kind of intentionally create disorder in order to kind of create the new ground for new movement. So I'm just repeating myself, which is something I do. Apologies.
As you were
No,
summarizing,
I think that's it's a very apt point what you're mentioning, and so as the sort of new description or the of aporia is confusion.
Yeah.
It is considered a generative space, more to the point of uncertainty, and how like the relationship that I take to that is like beginner's mind, right? So to see with fresh eyes is a very actually yes, that's a place we want to go to from time to time to actually have a very generative reevaluation about where the fuck we're at and what we're up about. So.
I'd be very, the idea of aporia is also rooted in Socrates' philosophy, right? That was his method. His method was to bring you to a stage where you could say, well, I really don't know anymore, what it is that we're talking about, or that I thought that I knew, et cetera, et cetera. So a nice thing to do would be to, if you're doing this with intent, which was Socrates' way of doing things, it's like, well, what structure would you use to take something and have a dialogue that would not be the nice kind of dialogue that we're used to, if you want, where people sort of agree, but where somebody would be led by others to realize that a lot of what he or she thought about what she or he knew he thought is really now at a stage of extreme ignorance, an extreme confusion.
I think that's a lovely prompt. And I'm keen to like pick it of like what at liberating structure could we use to kind of take people intentionally into that space.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's
that's really interesting.
the one that comes initially to mind is Triz, right? You know, by focusing on how do we turn this thing into a dumpster fire, that's often a very generative space. It focuses attention on things that you don't want, which is quite a novel way to orient, right? Normally, my dummy's looking for fucking cookies all the time and is not so concerned about the smell of roadkill. So to orient my attention towards things that smell disgusting are usually the things I'm structurally ignoring. Um, Another structure that I think could be effective for that is both ecocycle as well as panarchy. Um,
Yeah.
ecocycle is a powerful way of sort of taking your existing portfolio and shaking the shit out of it and reorganizing it in such a way that enables folks to often look at things with fresh eyes. So and if there is some form of problem statement, I would say wise crowds, but maybe less so.
I feel like Panicky and Ecocycle feel like more like how to map or organize things that haven't been organized before. At least that's kind of how I've got a mental model for them. What maybe I think the liberating structure, I don't know enough, but I'm looking for one that and I don't know much about Triz, so it might be Triz, but I'm looking for one that is about forcing you to kind of face your own assumptions or face your own or bike shedding or just kind of, and maybe critical uncertainties, or trying to kind of really push people into a uncomfortable conversation about acknowledging how much they don't know and making them uncomfortable, I suppose. So I'm kind of looking for.
That's the idea. So what about wicked questions?
Yeah, that's the one I was just grabbing. Wicked questions for sure. Yeah, I just threw it up there. Wicked questions for sure, because it invites us to say, all right, I mean, wicked questions, if you understand paradox, wicked questions is very simple. Find the fucking paradox, find the dilemma that you're up against, find I want both of these but I can only have one, and then actively search for the higher order synthesis that brings those things out of that either or relationship and puts them actually in one line with each other, and like realizes that, oh, I can have them both at the same time when I look at the situation from that perspective. Um, there's another exercise that I think are in the sort of liberating structures in development category that could also be effective for that. One of them is myth turning, and the other one is talking with pixies.
Talking with pixies is fun.
Yeah, those are both, from my experience, lived experience, those are very disorienting structures.
Mm.
Like when I do
What
those,
was the first one, Jeremy? Myth, what? Myth
myth turning.
turning.
Yeah. So the way myth turning basically works is you basically invite an entire group of people to take on the role of Socrates and ask you provocative questions, and then you rotate between them quite quickly as the person with the question. So you're basically getting like shit tons of questions that you can't fucking answer thrown at you, and that just like cognitive overload just empties your fucking brain and leaves you feeling stupid in a quite delightful way.
And I
Talking
think
with
that's kind of that's exactly what we're trying to do here is we're trying to facilitate people into a particular headspace that kind of then means that they've kind of like more primed for a generative conversation. What was the
Yeah.
other one? Pixie chat?
Talking with pixies.
Talking with Pixies,
Yeah.
thank you.
Talking with pixies. So talking with pixies, basically, if you envision the angel on your left shoulder and the devil on your right shoulder, you literally have two people take on those roles of, okay, you be a very sort of like optimistic, um, uh, optimistic and conservative archetype, right? Take on these two different roles, and they literally stand on each side of your head and talk at you at the same time. And and again, that's one of those things that like after just like 3 minutes of these two people sort of nattering at you at the same time, you cannot parse, neurologically you only have one language center, so you can't parse actually consciously the conversation, and that pops you into that state of
It's
like aporia.
it's like a balanced version of Black Hat or Devil's Advocate, where you have like the angel's advocate and the devil's advocate. Like it's actually like not just completely negative and destructive all the time. Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I don't
about
know about
overload.
I don't know about enough about critical uncertainties, but I'm just kind of reading into the words a little. What can someone kind of unpack that one for me, or like would that be applicable?
I know, critical in the disorder space.
Mm.
Well, why
It's
don't we go
much
to another space for something? Because I think that we're doing quite well in the disorder.
Okay, nice.
So
Um,
critical uncertainties, I would say, for me, is much more in aligned with the analysis, right?
Okay,
So
thank
in
you.
the
That's good
complicated,
enough. Should we? Which quadrant would you like to focus on, Phil?
well, we can finish with critical uncertainties in the complicated space because I do believe that it's analytical in nature, but I'd be very interested in to explore the complex space rather.
Right, great.
But
So
it's critical. I don't know where Jeremy. So critical uncertainties is basically making a 2x2 matrix, right? With two different kinds of information, of attributes. One is what is critical, what is most critical and less critical, what is most uncertain and
right,
less uncertain.
got it.
But then the work around there is interesting because at least the way I do it with like constructing a scenario, which is a strategy for each squares, right? But based on an anecdote. So the question you ask is, okay, how does it feel to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how does it feel to be in the most uncertain and most critical space for this given situation you're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, And how does it feel like? And then once you have the how does it feel like? What does it look like? What do you see? Who is next to you? Okay, if you have this kind of approach, then you strategize on this, right? You say, well, what does that mean? Okay. And then when you have that, you go for the four quadrants, and then you try to find something that is running through all the quadrants, so that you get a sense of of how to strategize the situation you're in.
Got it. Thank you.
So I use it as a strategy tool, although strategy is a big word, but you see what I mean? This kind of level of abstraction, right?
Yeah.
Where you want an orientation, so you get an orientation at the end of the exercise.
Nice. So, if we've stepped from disorder, we found a part that we've identified to be complex, and is the next thing to kind of step into the next, like for that particular part that we would then start probing it. Would that be the next step?
So the next step would be, can we use liberating structures to find out the direction? Because the idea in complexity is that you don't posit a desired outcome. What you suggest on the other hand is to understand where you are at now.
Is that for all of the quadrants? Would be the next question. Or is it just for complex?
That's complexity's attribute, is that the idea is not to define a desired outcome and then see the steps that you need to reach from where you are now. It's to say, well, where am I now and where can it go now?
Right.
So yes,
sorry,
to
Carlos.
complement what he's saying, Philip, also the concept that we use also in evaluation is the concept of attribution and contribution. I mean, there are many factors that we cannot control, no? So for this, you use not the concept of attribution, because you cannot, for example, move an apple from one table to another. No, this is very simple. When there are processes that depend on you, but also in other stakeholders or in other contextual issues. No, so one thing is not controlling, but other thing is at least knowing which factors are there. No, which other stakeholders are not on the table. But you should know what could be their situation. No? So it's the issue. Yes, it's similar to what Philip was saying. The issue of contribution. No, so if we know about all the factors, contextual factors, and we do our best where we could be. No, knowing that it doesn't fully depend on us. It depends also on the context. No. On factors that we don't control, but we should know the best of the worlds, no? Of the situation.
So I think I heard something there, Carlos, around the understanding the context. And I think for me, with that I think that for me feels like that's applicable to all four quadrants of, and that's kind of the process of moving out of the kind of confused uncertainty into any one of these is about, it's almost like getting out of disorder or getting out of confused is about understanding the context. Does that make sense?
Yes,
but the issue is that when you are in simple and complicated situations, you can control the factors. I mean, this is the issue. No, you can control. Even the first step is knowing, the second is controlling. The complex is, even if you know the factors, you cannot control them. You cannot have any influence on them, or sometimes yes, no, sometimes no. This is the issue of complexity, that you cannot influence some of the factors.
Yeah, so that kind of makes sense then with what Phil was saying around, like, all you can do in that situation is then pick a direction because you can't control it. So then you can only chart it.
You should find the direction. That would be interesting if we can have a liberating structure that helps the community, the collective, to find the direction. Because everybody has an idea of where it can go, right? Now, how do you actually look at the present what is in not working called honesty. It's like where are we? Okay, and of course now in the Cynefin world you would do an ethnography, right? You would ask people, a lot of people. You would do what he calls sense maker, which is getting a lot of anecdotes, getting a lot of people to interpret their anecdotes, so that you would end up with a map, right? Like a landscape map, and then you would be able to actually see where to go. But in the idea of a workshop or facilitation, which is more limited, how would you go about to discover this? Where should we go?
Direction.
Hmm?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like it's it's kind of falls to me like with this word probe is like that we're trying to kind of understand where we are, and we're trying to probe to understand the direction. But obviously, the other way you could do it is, which feels like more like incremental, whereas like you could kind of try and just have people kind of focus more on like identifying like further away things, and then you kind of try and work backwards maybe.
It's disposition. You would there, because you're absolutely right, Dan. There's two ways, but there's the way of probe is because once you've known the direction, you can't immediately go there.
Yeah.
So you have to say, well, what's the first step? And what you do if you're working in complexity with a complexity mind, you don't do one probe. You do as many probes as you can, because you don't want to waste time. So since you don't know which probe is going to lead you to where you want to go or you can go, then in this case, you do a lot of probes simultaneously, right? Which nobody does in change management. Change management, you take one action and you see what happens. You take one project and you see what happens. Usually you put a lot of resources into it. That's not what you do when you're in the complex space.
Precisely. I think this is pound for pound for me, like the greatest frustration of working in an organizational context is that organizations themselves are complex adaptive systems.
Exactly.
So the one thing that I haven't heard yet that I'd like to upregulate is that one of the hallmarks of complex is unknown unknowns, meaning that it is by walking the path that we discover it actually. And so multiple probes, safe to fail probes at in parallel is the way that you would want it. So for me, the structures that are the most akin to that are open space technology. I want to create lots of things happening in parallel and give people the opportunity to self-organize around those things. And 15% solutions. I want those probes to be explicitly experimentation driven. Like the problem that sort of Philip points out is change management is we dream up a big fucking 100% solution and we're just chewing through it like we were building a fucking railroad. Whereas what I want is a raft of lots of teeny tiny little experiments, so that as we're delivering one of those, we're discovering something as we go. Anybody else?
It's very well said.
15% solutions.
Hmm.
So yeah, open space technology and 15% solutions, I would say these are, and this is why I think I see open space technology every fucking where in the complex domain. I see it as such it is not a panacea, but it is goddamn near a silver bullet, because what we're doing is we're creating an actual space. Dave Snowden I think refers to this a lot as rewilding agile. You're actually creating this little wildflower garden of complexity within the complex domain that allows a lot of shit to sort of happen or in this sort of very organic way. And in that organic exploration, like we can discover, hey, oh, we found something interesting here, and then run with that.
I like is there I don't know the sign yet by heart, but I mean, is there one in front of respond that looks like improv prototyping?
Yeah, the improv prototyping's
I
there.
think that improv
The concepts.
prototyping is a really good thing to do too.
Most definitely. For the response space, right? Once we've gotten some information back, we can feed that back out into the wider ecosystem, so to speak, and get people to play additionally with that thing that we're finding is relevant.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives you this gives you because basically for those who are not familiar with the framework, you want to amplify, right? Once the probe works, you want to have a way to amplify it.
Yeah.
Okay. And therefore the structure that would help you do that would be improv prototyping.
So stepping back quick, because I'm putting this in some context. So hypothetically, we went through disorder, we came to complexity with one of the parts, we probed a bit, we did some sense making, we did some responding, we went through these different LS structures. And it might be that that's in one kind of away day, it might be that that was over a few weeks, whatever. When, let's say we get to the point where we've done some improv prototyping and we've in that response space or response step, it feels to me like, is that then like getting back into a macro process of like you're trying to kind of move the part into one of these other quadrants?
You're moving towards complicated.
Got it. Okay. So that's kind of the direction that happens next.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
And you're very careful not to move too fast.
right. So you're moving from this to this. Okay.
You see, and in that one, in the thing that you have that, or you don't have it anymore. But anyway,
Sorry.
you go up again and onto the right, you
Yeah.
see the green space. That's the
Yeah.
liminal space. So at one moment, when your probes are going really well, then you enter a liminal space in terms of like how good are you at codifying it. The minute you can repeat it, the minute you're secure and the repetition of what you're doing, it goes into the complicated world. It leaves complex. If by any chance it doesn't work, in other words, you see the standardization, the codification doesn't hold for long, you go back to complexity.
Got it.
And if you look at the 3D one to the left of this guy, right? I think that for me, this is my favorite visual of the Cynefin sense making framework, because by adding this layer of depth to it, you can see that, okay, you run your fucking experiments in complex, and by doing so, you're investing an amount of energy that allows you to lift yourself into the complicated domain. You're able to invest the requisite time and energy to identify at some point, oh, these are the things that matter, right? Remember, unknown unknowns don't stay unknown forever if you're involved in like a rigorous scientific method. Yes, you're going to be wrong for a while, but at some point, if you look at anything long enough, you're going to figure out how that motherfucker works. And once we're there, we're no longer in this, oh, complex, unknown shit. No, we now have got it figured out. I push this, that thing over there moves. All right, we can repeat that process all goddamn day, so to speak.
Um,
The Mhm.
And
yeah.
like, for example, sorry, Carlos, you want to say something?
No. It's no, it's very interesting.
And just
No.
another comment on this, as you move along, right, towards complicated, you have situations and you have tools and you have whatever methods that sit in the liminal space no matter what. Like, for example, Scrum sits there because Scrum is very linear, right? It is very detailed, very linear. You have roles that belongs to the complicated domain. But as long as you have a discussion on the backlog, not in terms of activities, but in terms of requirements, you're in the complex world.
Got it. I'll quickly comment on this. I really love this visual because one of the things for me is I wish that it wasn't a cliff that the clear was on. I wish it was more like a more sophisticated building. I love that there's a little bit of bricks there in the complicated because for me, I think I've used this analogy before of like when you're building an organization, one of the things you're doing is you're developing policies, procedures, you're developing stuff, and that you can, I've visualized that before as height. That like as you're building a platform that everyone gets to operate on, and everyone gets the benefit of the height. You can see more, and you're more productive. You have potential energy that you can act from, and like it's kind of, there's a nice analogy there. So I think that it's when you get to that clear space, and it's interesting when I think about community building or Inspiral or things like that, of like where you've got certain things to that clear space, and you're literally onboarding someone straight there. They don't have to go through this stuff to get there. And I think that's kind of, there's something there for me around the power of getting into that clear space. So anyway, that's just a comment on the diagram.
Oh, for sure. And that's why like automation also exists in that space, because once you have simple buckets, right? So the search algorithm for ClearSpace is simple, right? It's fucking sense, categorize, respond. Are the dishes clean? In which case I put are they wet? Are they dirty? Or are they clean? Based on those three statuses, I know exactly what the fuck to do, and I can automate the shit out of that, right? So there is a lot of.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
No, there is a lot of value that can be generated from that clarification. I think the cliff, though, is there as a reminder of sometimes the situation changes. If you're not paying attention, if you're just sort of doing your job in the space of that clarity, you can find yourself fucking slipping on a banana peel and crashing into the chaotic. I think there's, generally speaking, with all of these, what I call the search algorithms for the space, that directionality that you're indicating is significant, because if I apply the search algorithm for chaos in complex, I will waste some time, but it will fucking work. I can apply the search algorithm for chaos in any situation, and it will work well enough. But if I apply the search algorithm for clear, sense, categorize, respond, in complicated, I will kick myself through disorder into chaos. If I apply the complicated algorithm, if I try to sense, analyze, and respond in a complex domain, I will create a fucking mess out of things, and I will kick myself once more into chaos. So that directionality about where these things are useful, so that's my contribution to Cynefin. Thank you, Dave, for making Cynefin and making me feel like a smart person for having figured something out. Anybody else? And on the flip side, with complex, right? I can use the complex algorithm. I can probe, sense, respond in a complicated situation. That will work. It will waste some time and energy, but hey, it might turn out to be a good thing if I'm on that liminal boundary.
Dave. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but once more, if I use complex in chaos, not only am I fucking wasting time, I'm probably making the situation much more dire for myself. But I think that's an acceptable banana peel. Anybody else?
Just a thing for Dave, who's playing with a nice arrow right here. The idea is to go from simple to chaos. In other words, when you're like Jeremy said, when you're not paying attention, things are changing, and your ways are so set that you continue even though you know it's the wrong direction. But then this is why in the Cynefin framework you have a fall, right? You fall from the edge into chaos, and what you have to always remember is that going up again is extremely, extremely hard,
right,
and costly.
So would there be conditions that you would intentionally do it?
Yes, there are. You for innovation, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Innovation.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, you take a liminal space between chaos and complicate and complex, where you relax the constraints, okay, and you function like in the and you let things happen.
Right.
That was the famous 20% of Google when Google did it.
So would you wouldn't be trying to go back to chaos, you'd be trying to go from clear straight into that liminal space,
But
really.
the fact is, chaos, nobody wants to stay in chaos, especially if it's
Yeah.
if it's forced on you. Okay, and there's nothing much you can do except when you cut those areas, you design those areas for innovation. Okay, it's very hard to innovate. If you look at innovation, for example, in the complicated place, you only have instrumental, incremental thing. Nothing ever really happens there because the insides and the ins and outs are known or can be known, right? So your patterns of entrainments are already working, you see. So you modify them by having several expertise, but basically you see how I mean. So the radical innovation cannot happen there. It will happen in the liminal space between complex and chaotic.
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun, nerds.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest frameworks I know.
Yes, and also, well, this explains a kind of visualization of a problem-solving process, no? Passing from this situation, well, the simple, and you have a problem, this is the chaos, and how you fix the chaos, no? You need to pass through these other two steps, no? The complicated and complex until fixing the chaos.
Thank you guys. It's really thank you for this. I hope it will serve you all, but it'll definitely serve me for the next 24 hours.
Awesome.
So you have some
Mission
material for your
accomplished.
students.
Yeah, I can now I can take him for a long ride.
Yes, you are. The other day, remember you were sick. You are better, no, Philip?
Yeah, much better. Thank you. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, thank you,
Nice.
everyone. This was a great exercise. I really enjoyed it. I think it's something it would be interesting, maybe like for us to not keep on doing it as just a group of four. Like maybe this is something we can like kick up to the village and do it as a much larger group for other other crews to work on this kind of exercise, and then we can kind of all benefit from the kind of analytical work.
Totally. I'd love to upload this video if everybody's okay with that.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
I will. So this board is just publicly open at the moment. I think that's fine. It but it does mean that anyone can just go and edit stuff, but I think that doesn't really matter. I mean, I'll see if I don't know if there's versioning in Miro though.
So are we continuing with the same thing next time we do another framework? Is that something that are you still interested in that or?
I think that's a great question. I'm not I'm really open. I enjoyed this. I could do it again. What was yeah.
Carlos, you would be interested?
Yes, I'm always also interested in kind of classifying the different approaches. No, that we have so many at the end that yes, as I have said you, I'm also speaking with Jeremy. I'm always interested in meta structures, how to help ourselves to organize so many approaches. And I mean, one way is the experience that you have your toolkit, and another is for if you have not so much experience. If you know some kind of meta structure that helps to organize all these ones. No, I don't know if you know something.
Oh, all these ones. Wow.
Or some of them. I don't know. For doing this kind of things, you can use this for doing that other things you could use. But again, this is an idea. At the end, there are a lot of parallelisms between approaches. No, okay. And the same approaches though is used in different fields also because they are tools. Well, I didn't say about the decision. No, but, I mean, I am comfortable as much as we understand a bit the different approaches. And
Cool. Well, let's give it a go. Check out.
Yeah, I think checkout would be good. Yeah, at least I don't feel like I heard a decision there around like what are we doing next time. But at least for me, I'm really happy to continue this exercise. I'm also happy to kick it into the village and maybe like if I heard what Carlos just said, if I understood that correctly, it was like maybe not doing this kind of mapping analysis that we did today, but more stepping back and maybe up and trying to classify some of the stuff that we put in, and maybe we do that, and then we kick this kind of a process into the village to kind of continue with the wider group, and then we prototype on some sort of other classification thing.
Yeah, but Dan, I mean, that's very kind of you, but the point is like, you know, the village is the village.
Right.
You know, they have stuff to do, right? They have stuff to show, they have stuff to, I guess. Okay, I mean, before you say, well, we take something, we throw it there, as you can see, it took a long time. It's a wonderful exercise, this. So either there are other frameworks that you would like to explore in terms of liberating structures, right? Not in terms of what they are usually, how do you say, described and used. Or you want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. I think
imagine that we took this Miro board and we put it into the village. Now we have for the next 6 sessions, we have 6 frameworks, we have 6 have, so it's done. So whatever the village was thinking of doing, it's not going to do. You know, we gave them the content.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's such a good idea, this.
Okay. So then maybe it's a case of just then picking another framework for us next time, going through the same process, and then
if we want to do this, or if you want to go up a notch and and do it, then it would be the thing about liberating structures with themes. LS processes.
This is also something that we agreed last time, no? About themes, no? That was it was this related to meta structures, no? Something like this.
Yeah, we mentioned the idea to try to understand how to use LSs in terms of themes. Like, for example, aporia. We know that if we want to get to aporia, a very good way to start would be like, for example, with Triz. Okay, or it would be with wicked questions. All right, but you have other themes. You have sharing, you have innovation, prototyping, you have God knows what. You have lots of themes.
Collaboration.
Yeah, cooperation, whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I think from my 2 cents, I'm much more keen on grabbing another frame and doing this again, rather than trying to do, you know, hyper meta, for the purpose of, if we can keep it as close to the ground and see lots of different applications in a useful way, I think that meta structure that you're looking for will emerge, basically, when we can go, oh, this is good ways to use that thing, and this is also a good way to use that thing. Now I can sort of see the connection between those things. My hunch is that if we do this 4 times or so on something that's pretty widely, if we do the design thinking, if we do the business model canvas, I think then we'll probably have a much better understanding of like, oh, this is how these tools are broadly used. Anybody else?
Yeah, and even better, how to use them with liberating structures. For the moment, they're mostly not used with liberating structures at all.
Okay, so we continue, but we are alert, open to thinking about the meta structures.
Well, I tend to agree with Jeremy that they will emerge.
Okay, the concept of emerging, we need to be
Yeah, we'll figure it out. What I would say though is one of the things that I do appreciate that we were able to do is to make to use everybody's brains for a relevant challenge. So
Yeah,
coming back to if there's a way that we can make this particularly actionable for something that you're working on, then let's also I would again prioritize that. Anybody else?
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like it's a bit of a checkout. I like the plan. Happy to. I mean, to be honest, like on a purely personal, selfish way, I would happily grind through every single one of these things doing this exercise. So, like, I really enjoyed this. I think I was just trying to respect everyone's kind of time, and also maybe also recognizing how much I've enjoyed this. Maybe also recognizing other people might enjoy it as well. And I don't want to go and steal all the opportunity that we've kind of mapped out today.
No, man, keep it all for ourselves, Dan. We're gonna keep it all for ourselves.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I did like the fact that we whoever said that we focused kind of on something that's actually helpful to Phil right now. That was lovely as well. So if there's another opportunity like that, that's great. But otherwise, yeah, that sounds good for me for next time. And I agree that the kind of meta categorization of all this stuff will just emerge once we kind of go through the exercise 3, 4, 5 more times.
Okay. No, me too. I feel it's a wonderful way of working. For me, I mean, it's a very nice experience working with you, with the three of you, from my perspective. So, no, very interesting, inspiring.
So next time we
Sure.
do the design thinking diamonds or what?
Now, if you think, why don't we go through the different approaches and which one of us we select one and we agree on, well, at the end, between the four of us, which one could be better. I mean, this way we have the opportunity to revisit all of them. Perhaps we have some of them have escaped our attention. It could be the diamond, but perhaps some of us could suggest another one.
Sure.
Decide next time. All right. I gotta fuck off, nerds. It's been good times.
I hope
Bye.
your children
Everyone.
will not be there, Jeremy. I hope your children will not be there.
I'll
This will be chaotic.
I'll upload this video to Notion. I'll share the link to everyone. All right.
Okie dokie.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dan,
Dan.
for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank
Good
you.
game. Good game.
Ciao, 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 ciao. Thank you. Thank you.
All good, bro.